When you look at a single living thing, a bird, tree, anything, have you ever just stopped and wondered how it fits into the grand, complex dance of life on Earth? Well, today we're going to do just that. We're diving deep into ecology, starting with one lone organism and scaling all the way up to see how entire populations thrive, compete, and coexist.
All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll ask what really makes up an organism's world. Then, we'll crack open its survival toolkits to see how it adapts to challenges. After that, we're going to zoom out to see how one becomes many, how these groups interact, and finally, we'll untangle that web of life with some absolutely incredible real-world examples.
Okay, so let's start at square one. It makes sense, right? To understand the whole forest, you first have to understand a single tree. We're starting with the individual, the fundamental building block of literally any ecosystem.
Whoa, okay. I know this looks like a lot, but the idea here is actually super simple. Ecology is all about levels. Don't worry about reading every single word, just follow the logic. It all starts with one organism. A group of those organisms makes up a population. Then, when you get a bunch of different populations interacting, you have a community. It's how nature builds complexity from the ground up.
To really get a handle on an organism, you gotta know two key things: its habitat and its niche. And here's a great way to think about it. The habitat is its address, the physical place it calls home. But the niche, that's its profession. It's what it does for a living, how it gets food, its whole role in the system. One is where it lives, the other is how it lives. Big difference.
Of course, no organism lives in a little bubble. It's constantly being shaped by its non-living, or abiotic, environment. And we're talking about the big ones here. Temperature, how much water is available, sunlight, the kind of soil it's on. How an organism deals with these challenges is pretty much the definition of survival.
So, given all those challenges, how on earth do organisms actually cope? Well, that brings us right to our second section, the survivor's toolkit. We're about to explore the incredible strategies that living things use to adapt and thrive.
The very first tool in the kit, and honestly, it's a huge one, is this concept called homeostasis. It's this remarkable ability to keep a stable internal state no matter what's going on outside. For us, that means keeping our body temperature locked in at about 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 Fahrenheit. It is a constant, energy-burning, balancing act.
Now this really boils down to two main strategies for dealing with the outside world. You can see it in that little graph there. Organisms can be regulators, like us, burning energy to keep everything inside nice and constant. Or they can be conformers, basically letting their internal state change right along with the environment. It's a fundamental choice. Do you fight the change, or do you just go with the flow?
And we can take that same fight or flow idea and apply it to something specific, like temperature. Euthermal organisms are the generalists. They can handle a really wide range of temperatures. But stenothermal organisms are total specialists. They can only survive in a very narrow temperature window. So you see, these are the kinds of questions evolution is always answering.
So when you put it all together, an organism really has four main plays in its book. 1, it can regulate its internal state. 2, it can conform to the outside world. 3, if things get really bad, it can just migrate and leave. Or 4, it can suspend its life processes. Think of a bear hibernating or a seed just waiting for rain. That's the complete toolkit.
And check this out. Here's a really cool specific example of adaptation in action. It's called Allen's rule. It's this observation that mammals living in cold places, like an Arctic fox, tend to have shorter ears and limbs. Why? It's simple, really. It reduces their surface area and helps them hold on to precious body heat. A super elegant solution to a very cold problem.
All right, we've got a handle on the individual. Now let's pull the camera back. In section 3, we are officially moving from one organism to many, and we're going to explore the fascinating world of population growth.
This slide shows the two classic stories of how populations grow, and you can see them right in those two curves. That J-shaped curve on the left, that's exponential growth. It's a population explosion when resources are basically unlimited. But that S-shaped curve on the right, well, that tells a much more realistic story. That's logistic growth, where a population levels off when it hits the natural limits of its environment. Let's just break that down a bit more. That J-curve, that's what happens in a perfect world with endless food and space. The S-curve, that's reality. As a population gets bigger, resources get scarcer and growth starts to slow down, eventually stabilizing around a maximum level we call the carrying capacity, or just K. And if a population overshoots that K, you often see a pretty dramatic crash. Nature always has its limits.
But here's the thing, populations aren't living in their own little bubbles, right? So in Section 4, we're going to explore what I like to call the social network of the natural world, all the ways different species interact with each other.
It all boils down to the simple question, but the answers are incredibly complex. When different species cross paths out there in an ecosystem, what happens next? Is it a partnership, a fight, or something else entirely?
And wow, this table just lays it all out so perfectly. We can classify every interaction with a simple plus for a benefit, a minus for a harm, or a 0 for no effect. So in mutualism, it's a win-win. Both get a plus. Competition is a lose-lose. Both get a minus. Now, predation and parasitism are both a win-lose, but the difference is key. Predation is quick, it's over, while parasitism is a long-term, complicated relationship. Then you get the subtle ones, commensalism, a win-0, and emmensialism, a lose-0. This is literally the framework for it all. Okay, now for my favorite part. Let's bring all these concepts to life with some amazing, and sometimes downright weird, real-world examples from that tangled web of life.
Let's start with competition. Gauss's principle. I mean, it's a harsh but fundamental rule of nature. If two species are fighting for the exact same limited resource, one of them is eventually going to win, and the other will be eliminated. The extinction of the Abingdon tortoise after goats were introduced to its island is just a tragic, real-world example of this in action.
And then you have parasitism, which can get unbelievably complex. I mean, just look at the life of the human liver fluke. Its life is this multi-stage journey that's totally impossible without all three of its hosts. It has to go from a snail to a fish before it can finally complete its life cycle inside a human. It's just a stunning example of that intricate dance between a parasite and its hosts.
And speaking of devious strategies, you have to hear about brood parasitism. The cuckoo doesn't even bother building a nest. No, it just lays its eggs in a crow's nest. The poor, unsuspecting crow then raises the cuckoo chick, a lot of the time at the expense of its own babies. It's a brilliant, if maybe a little ruthless, evolutionary shortcut.
But hey, it's not all fighting and trickery out there. Nature is absolutely full of amazing teamwork. Mutualism, that win-win scenario, is everywhere you look. From the fungus and algae that team up to form lichens, to the fungi that help plant roots grab nutrients, to the clownfish that's protected by the stinging tentacles of a sea anemone. These are powerful partnerships that benefit everyone involved.
And finally, we can learn so much just by looking at the structure of a population. These age pyramids are kind of like a census, showing you how many individuals are in each age group. A pyramid with a really wide base, like the one on the left, tells you it's a rapidly expanding population. One that's more rectangular is stable, and if it's top-heavy, that's a population in decline. It's a powerful snapshot of a population's past and a forecast for its future.
So, we've gone on quite a journey, from a single organism's fight for balance, all the way to the intricate web of competition, predation, and cooperation that defines a population. So the final question I want to leave you with is this. How does understanding these fundamental rules of life change the way you see the park outside your window, the garden in your backyard, or even the global ecosystem that we are all a part of?